Hey everyone, this is your host, Andrew Holland. Thank you so much for listening to the Andrew Holland podcast each and every week, where we talk about business, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. As an entrepreneur who's been through a lot of highs and a lot of lows, I started this podcast to be a source of weekly motivation, inspiration, and support for all of us who are working to achieve something meaningful. And as importantly, so that none of us ever have to feel alone or isolated while we're doing so. Together, we explore the stories of successful people, we get insight and advice from individuals who have accomplished amazing things. We discuss practical and fascinating business models and strategies, and we dive deep into understanding ourselves as human beings. So please, help me grow our group and subscribe to the show on your favorite audio platform. Subscribe to, watch, and thumbs up our episodes on our YouTube channel, the Andrew Holland Podcast. Follow and interact with me on Twitter and Threads. My handle is A Holland Podcast. That's A Holland Podcast. That's probably my favorite part of the whole podcast is the interaction I get with our guests and with you as our listeners. Lastly, if you enjoy the show and you want to support what we're working to accomplish, please share our show with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues at work. This show is nothing without you and your support, and I'm so incredibly thankful for each and every one of you listening, watching, and sharing the podcast every single week. Now it's time to get our motivation, inspiration, and support for this week and jump into today's episode. In today's episode, Dr. Philip Hickman joins the Andrew Holland Podcast. Dr. Phil is a renowned educational expert. He's an ed tech visionary. He's a psychologist, an author, and an entrepreneur. He has experienced every aspect of our education system as a superintendent and assistant superintendent of the Houston Independent School District, the 7th largest school district in the country. He has been a counselor, he's been a psychologist, but he's not only been in academia for a long time, being a professor for 17 years, but he's also a business owner and an entrepreneur who founded PlaBook Education. And he's focusing on this proprietary software that he has created that is intended to help move our education system in this country forward and ensure that all kids, no matter what their background, socioeconomic status, etc., have the opportunity using AI and gamification to understand the basic fundamentals of reading, which is so crucial to any kid's success as they progress in life. We cover a whole range of topics. You're going to love this podcast because we cover the gamut of issues, many that are hot button topics. Education is an important issue. Dr. Phil talks about it's important to our national security and how we need to completely upend the education system as it currently exists if we're going to compete in the 21st century. And we talk about things like racism in America and what it's like for him as an African American to raise capital in the VC world. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Phil. I think you will too. And it's important that everything we talk about in this podcast, more people are able to have these types of intellectual, respectful conversations in spite of our varying perspectives. And you will want to share it with your family, friends, and your colleagues because it's that important.
While Andrew Holland is a CPA, a real estate broker, and involved in multiple businesses, including some investment companies, the Andrew Holland podcast is for informational purposes only. All of Andrew's views and those of his guests are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of any of the businesses or companies Andrew or his guests are affiliated with. You should not treat any advice, conversation, business recommendation, investment recommendation, or anything of the like as a specific inducement to make a specific business decision, take a specific action, make a particular investment, or follow a specific business or investment strategy. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the show.
Dr. Phil, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the Andrew Holland Podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation. This is a great opportunity to be on your podcast and chat with you.
Well, the pleasure is all ours. You have a list of credentials that is a mile long, very impressive. You're the co-founder and CEO of PlaBook Education, which I want to talk a lot about, especially with education being such an important issue in this day and age across all spectrums, business, personal, political. You've been a guest lecturer at Columbia University. You've been the intendant or superintendent and assistant superintendent of the Houston Independent School District, the 7th largest school district in the country. Am I right about that?
It is 300 schools, 210,000 students. And then
So, what I love, you've got 5 postgraduate degrees and you've got a lot of entrepreneurial experience. A lot of times we see people who are in academia their whole life and they stay there. And then we see business people. What I love is you have combined both of them. You've taken what you've learned in the academic world and you're utilizing it in a very entrepreneurial fashion to try to improve what I think most people would agree is an incredible challenge in this day and age in the 21st century, and that's the education of our kids. So I'm excited to ask you all of these questions. We've got so much to cover. But before we get started, everybody always wants to know, how did you get to where you are? So take us back. Where did you grow up? Where are you currently living? How did you become an entrepreneur? How did you get so many postgraduate degrees? And you also have a doctorate. Give us some insight on your childhood and take us from there.
Well, I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and most people are familiar. I went to a school, Raytown South, heavily sports school, basketball, and those kind of things. But one of the luxuries that I was afforded to my brother and sister are going to get me for saying this, but so they're a little bit older than me. In high school, they had to go to summer school, and I didn't. But of course, when you have siblings, you can't leave one at home without the other ones. So I was snuck into a computer class it was DOS. So I'm dating myself.
Well, you
It
and
was
I are
blue
both.
screen.
I know what you're talking
And
about.
and so we had the opportunity to learn computers, even though I wasn't a high school student. I was supposed to be in that class, but during the summer, and that kind of gave me my love for technology. The other aspect of it was my father. He worked for UPS, and he used to deliver to the more affluent area. And they were back then they had computers. So I actually had every computer there was: Commodore 64, Macintosh, like the Apple. And my father, once back then when people used them up to a certain degree, they didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
Then they saw, and he would buy them. He would buy them from them. And so that had my experience with technology. But then when you look at entrepreneurship, we go back to even elementary school where the teachers had to come and call my parents because I was walking around with a large wad of money. And the money that I was getting was my parents, they knew I would go to, it was almost like a Sam's back then. And I would buy a warehouse of candy and I would sell it to students. And then the other aspect of it was back then lunch was 95 cents. And literally kids didn't value their nickels. And so I would collect the nickels, and then that's where I would buy the candy and then upsell it to everyone in the school in that sense. So that started my love, my entrepreneurial journey. And then my father, he was very like kind of a tinker, even though he worked for UPS. He would build his own CBs, the walkie talkies, and he would sell them to his friends. And so he would always in our garage. We grew up where our garage, we never parked our cars in our garage because they were full of unfinished ideas that my dad had.
Like every great entrepreneur.
Right. And so, and then so we will always be able to tinker and play around with those kind of things. And so that also kind of got me, in the entrepreneurial spirit.
So much to cover just in that little bit. So ironically enough, how long was your dad a UPS driver for?
So 38 years.
Oh, so my dad was a UPS driver for 35 years.
Oh, wow.
Out of Wisconsin. And you were in Missouri, correct? He was in Missouri.
I was in Missouri.
Okay,
Yep.
so
Yeah.
they both had to deal with terrible winters. And
Yeah.
That's pretty much all I remember. I'd be curious to hear your perspective. I mean, they worked so many hours. I mean, they worked their tails off. And people think, oh, the guy in the brown suit makes tons of money and they have the best life in the world. And I was like, what are you seeing? Because it's work, and it's a hard job.
It's a hard job. He switched between two. He was a local driver,
Okay.
And he actually saved the kid's life one time. And this is just real quick. A student was riding a big wheel in one of the affluent neighborhoods, and he was going down the hill, and a car was coming. So my father tilted his UPS truck over to block the car from the kid He got a letter, he met the mayor or whatever. They celebrated
Wow.
him. But the folks they owned, that was my other interaction. They owned a bunch of restaurants. And so we had free passes to go to these restaurants forever. My dad lost the pass and he never had the, pride to kind of go back and ask them for
Yeah.
it. But we would have had free food. But the other aspect of my journey was that, I played sports. My brother went to college playing basketball, but he was 6'8". I actually lettered in 5 sports. So football, basketball, wrestling, track, and baseball. And I went to college on a football scholarship. But before that, I was the ball boy for the Kansas City Royals. And so
Really?
and this was before I was around 14, which I really shouldn't have been. But they knew me in the community in sports and wise, and I applied to be an usher. And I didn't apply to be a ball boy, but they pulled me down. And so I was a ball boy. So we were in the same locker room as all the players. So I was a pretty big kid at that size, not big as in heavy, but muscular, good height.
Yeah.
So back then, baseball players were not as big as they are now. and so,
It's
and
changed,
so
hasn't it?
it's changed. And so you really couldn't tell if I was a player or not. We wore the same uniform, came out of the same locker room. So of course I would sign autographs and those kind of things. But back then the guys were more than just not that they're no knock on whatever's now, but these guys they were well rounded. I mean, and so they would talk to me. They would talk to me about business. There were, all these other things that they were involved in. And I'm talking George Brett, Hal McRae was our coach, like all these. Bo Jackson was at the tail end when I came. He
Okay.
was there, then he had left. But anyway, I learned so much more aside from sports, and don't let sports use you, and this is what college is like, and these are the opportunities as far as entrepreneurship. And so those are the kind of things and the lessons learned that I had from you know professional baseball players, and then of course my father, and so yeah, that kind of started everything.
Well, what I love about, well, clearly you're genetically an entrepreneur and it runs in the family. I love the story about, well, if nobody else is going to value the nickels, I'll just collect them and then I get free lunch. And I've always been a big believer. There's 4 different types of entrepreneurs. I talk about this a lot, and I seem to mention it on every podcast. You are obviously in the category of an entrepreneur who was born an entrepreneur and gives yourself the opportunity to take the risk to discover that you're an entrepreneur, which brings you where you are to today. But
Right.
I think the other important part in what you just said is you listened. So no matter what you were doing, and in spite of the fact that you were in some pretty significant affluent circles with the Kansas City Royals, and as you indicated, your dad delivered in the wealthy neighborhoods, and I'm sure he got to know a lot of those people, just like my dad did when he was delivering in the rural communities. Everybody knows the UPS guy because they want their package or they need their package, right?
Right, right.
But you listened and you use that as an opportunity to learn, as you just indicated, so much about business. What would you say? What did you learn from the baseball players who are so well rounded that really sticks with you today? Anything memorable or anything specific?
Yeah, I mean, one is just the your pure perseverance, right? Like the I think the misconception that people have about being an entrepreneur is that you don't work for nobody and you're just doing whatever it is you want to do. It's easy selling, it just takes money to start up and those kind of things. And I mean, emotionally, it is up and down. It's a roller coaster, and to not have that explained to you in a sense, so that I didn't walk in with the expectations that it's either a home run or not. It's either and that's where I lost a lot of my peers. They have great ideas, but there's implementation that has to happen, and there's just cycles and just all kind of other factors that happen outside of your pure product, and then they give up, right? And so those are some of the lessons that I learned from them. I mean, those guys will really take time to explain their story, and just to hear these stories. And I think one of the benefit that I had was to see the guys that are very successful in one area, and they will tell me about their failures in another, right? And so that was eye opening, that they don't have to be doing this in a sense. I mean, they're making pretty good money,
Yeah.
but just the talk about their failures and the way that they persevered and different strategies that they use. I mean, those things are invaluable.
I mean, truer words were never spoken. Everything you just said there. I mean, that's really why I started this podcast, because as a young entrepreneur, nobody told me And I think our society, as you indicated, glamorizes this idea of being an entrepreneur and, oh, you have as much free time as you want and you're rich and you work whenever you want. All complete fallacies, of course, for those of us who have
Right.
done it before. So for
Yeah.
those of you who are listening and are aspiring entrepreneurs, take this to heart, because as it sounds like you had the opportunity to learn, but you can't really internalize that, the highs and the lows that you discussed, until you experience it for yourself. And for me, that was a rude awakening, because, you go to
Yeah.
college and you get a degree, and, I'm a CPA, you've got multiple postgraduate degrees and a doctorate. And academic, I'm a big believer, and I'm curious on your is an excellent foundation, but you just can't teach business until you do the real thing. You have to experience it for yourself, primarily to get the emotional impact of really what it's like to fail and what it's like
Yeah.
to have the volatility in such short periods of time. Tell me your perspective on that.
Yeah. But see, when you say that, it's really because of the education system. See, we teach the benefit of education is memorization, regurgitating facts. So we don't teach the aspect of entrepreneurship, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity from the beginning. Like those are the things are actually the skills that are going to be not going to be, but are important in the present and then the future, especially when technology, you don't have automation,
Yeah.
where the memorization and those kids are great. White collar automation is happening. See, that's where people are not talking about. They think automation is just the low level jobs. White collar automation is happening.
AI.
And so
I mean,
if with AI, even if you look, like you just mentioned, if you look at the different changes where the industrial revolution was a large impact, .com was huge. The mobile, which we're in kind of that they're ending right now, was huge. AI, if you look at the progression of all those errors, 30, 20, 30, 40 years, Chat GPT came out in what, February there? We're already at 4.
Isn't it incredible? I've talked about that on a previous podcast. It was entitled "Is AI Coming for You?" And it was
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about, that everybody doesn't realize. White collar has been protected, so to speak,
Yeah.
forever, the intellectual horsepower. But
Right.
as you pointed out, and I can't wait for you to talk about PlaBook Education, and I've looked at it thoroughly. I love the idea, and I'm excited to hear you as the founder describe it. But I mean, AI is the big talk of it, but I don't think people realize the impact that it's going to have on all of these professional industries, from Wall Street to attorneys to CPAs to education, all of
Medical
the,
doctors,
yeah,
everything,
it,
everything you can think of.
yeah,
Like it is real weird because even the way that we're pushing even our high school students, which that high school and middle, those kids, we're going to still keep them in the traditional education, and that's going to be a tragedy.
you're right.
Which, by the way, probably a area of national security.
Oh, there's no
I'm not
question.
trying to be funny.
I,
How can we compete as a nation?
yeah,
Listen, this is the lowest high school graduates right now. We have the lowest high school graduates in history. Where and then the product that we're producing may last a little bit for now, but even if you say, let's say a career technical education,
mm-hmm.
like I have a large group of students who say, hey, let's have these children become truck drivers, which is good, but we're seconds away from automated automobiles,
Yeah, we
right?
are.
Like Elon Musk just figured out, he went away from developing models to now using cameras a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
So we're close to having these cars, and so that means the trucks as well. So I'm saying, like, everywhere we're thinking we're grabbing students and preparing them, we're not.
It's
Even my
terrifying.
friend at McDonald's, yeah, my friend on the McDonald's, same thing. He was saying, do you understand that we're close to not only? I mean, look at the data that we're collecting from when you speak to the intercom. That's an AI,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a fail safe where it goes to the human, but pretty soon we're not going to need that human. And we already have. I don't know if you saw that they have that robot that actually can flip burgers.
Oh, I did. Yep.
$30,000. Did you know that's all it costs?
So it's interesting you say that. I was just having this conversation with another business owner in our coffee shop about automatic baristas.
Yeah.
And I looked at the price, and it's stunningly cheap. It's the same concept as what you just
Yeah.
described. A burger flipper, $30,000.
$30,000.
I mean,
that's one time I pay for. It's cheaper, first of all, than somebody working there full time without the insurance and all that, and the headaches and stealing and all those other things.
They're always there. They don't talk back. They always show up.
24 hours.
You pay for it
24 hours
once.
a day.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying that we are leaving our kids so ill-equipped. And so I want to talk about in just a bit how you're taking that on, because I think we need a million more people like you who are not afraid to challenge the status quo, who understand education, and who want to actually make a meaningful difference that will be effective in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And we see it across the country. And I'll be curious to hear your perspective. And we don't talk a lot about politics on this, but I love talking about politics. And because this is such an important educational, or this is such an important issue to everybody across all spectrums, education of our children, I'd be curious to hear, given your experience in the school system, about labor unions and how they can, if they can, help us change, if they even have the willpower, if they want us to change and adapt, or if they're trying to hold us back. But let's get to that in a bit. I want to focus on just how did you get to where you are today? So you're 14. You're the ball boy for the Kansas City Royals. You're in Kansas City. Sidestep. Are you a Kansas City Chiefs fan?
Of course.
I mean, it is good to be a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Now, do you want to?
I can say that with pride.
Do you want to know what my football team is?
Who?
The Detroit Lions. So I'm feeling pretty good after a week ago. So I won't rub it in. Don't worry.
You guys luckily got a win in there.
We did pull it off, which for the Lions is usually they can't pull it off. We'll see how they look this season. But and I think Patrick Mahomes is a fantastic quarterback, and I always enjoy watching him. So you're 14. Take us through high school. Take us through college, and how you got to where you are today. You've covered a lot. You've been a senior manager at Oracle. So give us just in 5 minutes, get us caught up to speed.
Right. So I played football at the University of Missouri. And so I end up fracturing my neck. And so what I wanted to do was compete. I still wanted to compete. This is real funny. I didn't even know my junior year in high school, I had a professor. I was always an honor roll student. And a professor said, are you going to graduate school? I said, I'm not in that track. I thought it was something I had to enroll in as a freshman. Like, no one told me about graduate school. I had no clue what graduate school was. And it took, it always takes a nurturing adult, right?
Exactly.
And so it took him to explain to me. And then, I always wanted to learn about learning, behavior, and all those kind of things. And so I went to graduate school, and then I started working in the school systems. And then and by the way, I did everything in the field of education. So from a substitute teacher, assistant teacher, a teacher, a school psychologist, a counselor, assistant principal, a principal, dean of students, and all grade levels. And then also, a director of education, assistant superintendent, area superintendent, and then I was superintendent in areas like in Mississippi as well. And then I was a national ambassador for the United States Department of Education. So even at the national level, and then I've also was a college professor. The issue was, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Again, most cultures or most societies, they actually take their best and brightest and they train them to be an entrepreneur. Their second tier person, they train to be doctors and lawyers, and because that person can only change their environment, where an entrepreneur can change generations.
That's
right?
A great point.
And so I've always butt my head as far as, people say, hey, you're too smart. You need to do this or you need to do this. It was going away from entrepreneurialism. But in the education system, I always had that bug. So I took any opportunity I can get to talk to people and those kind of things. And so that's what fell in my lap with Apple and Amazon. So I got to do things with Apple and Amazon, help create some products with Amazon Education. And that's when I was like, wait a minute, I can do this by myself. Because I watched the guys who created it, and a lot of them created education products but didn't have experience in education, just a great idea.
Yeah.
But that idea translated into the actual classroom, there was no overlap. And so when I wanted to tackle reading was because I looked at the national level. And these are statistics I always say: 75% of fourth graders in the United States read below grade level, and that doesn't matter. That's across everything: socioeconomic status, ethnicity, all those kind of things. And then when you look at 85% of jobs in 2035 that will exist have not been invented yet, but they will have technology, reading proficiency, critical thinking, and creativity, all those kind of things. Well, I want to figure out how can I address that. And then the other problem that we have is that people are not talking about the national teacher shortage. I'm telling you, I've been around the United States and still currently, I mean, there are buildings that throughout a whole district, they may have one certified teacher, and everyone else are people that they ask to come from the community to work into the classroom, but teaching those core subjects, not really teaching those core subjects. And so what I wanted to do was, how could I develop a tool that supports a teacher, so that still supports the student at the same time? So it's something that's not self-paced and it leaves the teacher out of it, and we don't know what's going on because there's always red flags that the student needs to, but so I developed a tool that actually will guide that process, involve the teacher, and make sure it gives recommendations and all those kind of things to the teacher so that they can do their intervention, what they do best, and pull groups and small groups. The other aspect of it was just from just even if I tell you from a layperson standpoint, we have been assessing using technology and or not assessing reading the wrong way. This is how we assess reading. So every national test or any test you have taken, you quietly read a paragraph and you answer multiple choice questions. That's reading comprehension. That's not basic reading. If the problem is the students have a problem decoding and breaking down. They spend so much energy trying to decode and read that they don't have enough space to comprehend what they read.
That's a great point.
Can they comprehend? Yeah, you talk to them. They can understand everything you say. They can understand every song, rap music out there. It's just the fact that they didn't have the basic reading skills. The only way that you can do that is you have a teacher sit next to a student and that can understand every phonemic mistake that student is making, errors and those kind of things, and then write up an intervention. Well, it takes 20 minutes per student. That is actually required. It's called a running record, but it's impossible. It takes 20 minutes per student. It takes you a week to do your class. So I developed a tool that uses speech recognition that actually can hear the child read, break this, and our speech engine, our voice engine is so powerful, and it's a proprietary engine that we hear all the way down to the phonemic level. So say if you read the word bat, we hear b, at, or the lack thereof. So we can even tell you all the way down to the unit of speech that child is lacking, vowels, phonemic awareness, phonemes, all those kind of things that make up basic reading, and then recommends kind of a gamification that the student is practicing and learning that skills, and recommend videos to reteach it. And then also giving recommendations to the teacher to help inform their curriculum and their instruction and how to intervene with that student as well. And then we have smart dashboards and all these other kind of things, man. It's pretty cool.
That is awesome, Dr. Phil. And that's what PlaBook Education, that's the fundamental proprietary technology upon which PlaBook Education is built. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, we have natural language models, and our language models are above board. The reason is because it's hard to for instance, Amazon, Alexa, those kind of things. It's hard to do children's voice because their voice changes all the time.
Yeah.
It squeaks, it cracks. They have front teeth one minute, they don't have front teeth. And so we not only have a custom language model, but our AI models around our natural language models, we're able to grow with the maturation of that student with more accuracy. We've taken 145 different accents and regional dialect at the same time. And then again, we add gamification to it, so it's fun, where the students are learning those skills. The science of reading. Here's another thing: is that people think that you're born, you learn to walk, you learn to talk, and then you read. That natural progression, not learn.
Yeah.
You're born, you walk, you talk, you read. Reading is actually not a natural thing. That's actually newer and a newer part of our evolution. So you actually take two different parts of the brain that are not designed, and you're rewiring the brain to learn how to read. And so it is rocket science, and it does need direct teaching. And the science of reading says you need to work on the skills. So we work on a holistic aspect, like I just showed you, reading comprehension, where you read and you answer multiple choice questions, as opposed to those skills, those phonemic awareness to understand letter sounds and blending and segmenting. And there's just so many things. Like, for instance, PlaBook. Like, if you really read it, most people say PlaBook, PLABOOK, and they say, you're a reading app. How do you misspell something? Well, it's a multisyllabic word, so the vowel can scream its name.
Yep.
But those are the complications of English. And so it's a play on words, but it's actually really how you can pronounce that word.
Yeah, and what Dr. Phil is talking about, so PlaBook Education is spelled PLABOOK, and that's why you're talking about PlaBook. And when I saw it, I'm like, obviously they're trying to do a play on words. At first, my thought was like, well, maybe PlaBook was taken already, so that's what they did. But so much to unpack there. First and foremost, how did you come up with this idea? Obviously, because of all the experience you have in the education system. But as you were alluding to earlier, lots of people have great ideas, but they don't act on them. And then lots of people have great ideas and they want to act on them. And this is particularly important in the technology realm, you need a coder, you need a developer, you need money and capital to actually do these things. Because even if you have the idea and you have the education and the experience, the practical experience like you do, bringing technology with education, implementing it is a whole nother ball game, both from the funding perspective and from the actual implementation perspective, creating and implementing it. Tell us about that process. How long ago did you do that? How did you go through the highs and lows of that journey to get to PlaBook Education to where it is today?
Yeah, so my journey took a little bit longer than most people. One is because I got frustrated, and I went to Launch Code KC to teach myself how to code. So it's a boot camp.
Yep.
And
how long ago was that?
2018.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know what Launch Code is, and there's a lot of, I would say, AI or coding type classes, or it's not really a class. It's like you said, a boot camp throughout the country. They're often in various cities, and Kansas City is pretty well known for being one of the more technologically advanced up and coming cities, and they host a lot of these things. So you went to Launch Code, this boot camp for individuals who want to learn how to code, and you learn it in what, a week or 2 weeks or something of that nature. Is that correct?
No, it's 6 months.
Okay. So this is a 6-month program. Okay. So tell us about that. You wanted to code,
but it's not every day, of course.
Okay. Yep.
But yeah, I wanted to learn how to code. And in 6 months, I knew how to code, but I didn't understand that my product dealt with artificial intelligence, just higher level code than coming out as a Dev 1 programmer.
Sure.
And so, I kind of put a basic framework together. And then I started talking to other dev shops, and just kind of, seeing the partner route who had an appetite for it. And the price tag is huge. And so I wanted to figure out, how do I get across to this price tag? And just like you said, Kansas City, they have a bunch of pitch competitions.
Mm-hmm.
So the first digital Sandbox, the first pitch competition I went in, as my old superintendent self. I came with a suit and tie. They looked at me like I was crazy, right? Because I didn't understand it. I didn't know the culture of technology in the tech field, right?
Yep.
One, I came in, all the way, suit, tied up.
But I like you played the part for a superintendent in education. But for those of you who maybe haven't seen photos or videos from these boot camps, I mean, it basically looks like a lot of these people rolled out of bed, or it's the tech culture. You just kind of wear what you want, how you want, and you're pitching to raise capital in this particular digital Sandbox. You said that's what it was?
Yeah, digital Sandbox. That was, to be honest, that's actually the first and last pitch that I ever lost. And so they told me to come back, and what they did was they give you a coach. So they gave me a free business coach. And they kind of went through my slides and just everything in general. Man, I learned so much. And then I also enrolled in a Kaufman class that it's called, I forgot, but the class. And so it taught me the framework of understanding this is, how you pitch. This is what technology is looking for. This is how you start with your business model and all those kind of things. Man, I learned so much. Went back to Launch Code, Digital Sandbox, and then I won. And then I won Launch Code KC, which was 100,000 or so more. And then, it just kept going. Arch grants, Google. I won, Google for startups. And so, 100,000 here, so I was able to get the startup capital without even raising money to build the technology that I had. The other reason why it took longer was in education. I just felt like we experiment on kids so much. And this is such of a high stakes because it's kind of an informative assessment as well, that I didn't want to experiment on kids. And so I did a lot of free piloting, got the feedback, a lot of things that people don't want to do as far as building the technology. I didn't want to just kind of start selling an MVP. What I call it was a more of a get the perfect little baby out.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get something that's a real good, perfect model and get it out there. And so that's what took a while. But once I got it to where I was, I felt like it had the acumen to assess and give correct information back to the teachers. Just last year, or the year before last, is when I released it. And man, it's making a difference. We're in New York, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kansas City. We have universities that's putting research behind it.
I mean, it's exploding, right?
Yeah, we are. And the problem was that, I tell you, we missed just from a business standpoint, we actually missed COVID. Like, if I would have had the idea,
I was going to ask you about that.
I didn't have it in COVID. And so you imagine how many students there's no way that you can assess or even help with reading during that time period. What are you going to have one kid at a time read virtually? Like, there was no way that we addressed reading. So we really messed up a lot of kids. And there were some kids that just didn't have the foundational reading at all. And they're in third grade now, fourth grade, reading at, a preschool and kindergarten level.
Yeah, and that's a problem. I mean, going back to what you originally said, there aren't enough teachers. Okay, well, now we have kids. We've a whole generation of kids who don't know how to read, don't have the fundamental basics of reading, which makes it more stressful on teachers, which makes it you get burnout much more quickly, and so you're going to have less teachers. I mean, we can talk 5 hours about that whole system and how it's kind of perpetuating itself. And I want to know how you think we can fix it. But before we do that, your story about how you raise capital is fascinating to all of our listeners, because it shows that there are opportunities for anybody to do something like that. Just backing up, you said you didn't want to release an MVP. For those of you who may not know what that is, that's minimum viable product. And you always hear, if you read any business books, don't get it perfect. Just get a minimum viable product that you can show to someone, that you can pitch to someone. They can see that there's something there. There, and then you can start raising capital. Tell me about, how did you get into Digital Sandbox? How did you get into Launch KC? For someone who's like, I've got a great idea, but I'm not a coder and I have a lot to learn. And as you said, when they hooked you up with a business coach, you learned a tremendous amount. How can anybody do that?
Yeah, to be honest with you, so what is it? Small business SBA. What is that?
Small business administration. Sure. Yep.
Administration. I would really suggest that people go there first. They have free resources, like they have free business coaches. As smart as I thought I was, as anybody can present, right? And so I was presenting an idea, but there is a framework. It really is just understanding that there is a framework that you, just from the beginning, that you have to understand that framework. I didn't understand things when they ask simple questions like, what's your pathway to market? I'm gonna do this, that, I'm gonna sell a commercial and to businesses and to this, that, no, everybody knows that doesn't work. Well, in that environment, they know, but you don't know coming out because that's all you see, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you have to know that you have to have one addressable market, understand the size of your market, like all those kind of things. The first thing that I would suggest is that you go and get a free coach, take those classes. One of the classes was like $20. It wasn't, It wasn't like it was $100,000 or whatever class, but the information you get is priceless. And so I would say that that's the beginning of it. And then to be honest, then your talent after that, I mean, it's your passion, your talent, understanding, do you have a founder story? Can you articulate it? Just all those kind of things. But the money is available for people to participate. And at some point, sometimes they run out of, the awareness of people going to those pitch competitions and those kind of things.
Yeah. I mean,
Look, I won a pitch competition for AARP. That's right. What does that have to
really
do with reading?
around education and reading. And for those, I'm assuming most of our listeners know what AARP is, but what is that? The Association for Advanced or Retired People. So it's generally thought of for elderly people.
Yeah.
Side note, I always get AARP magazines in the mail. Somehow they think I'm over 65, but I don't know if that's a good omen or a bad omen. But so you won a grant or a scholarship from AARP for your educational reading system.
I won it, yes, and they're great folks, by the way. Like, it's no joke. They pay for a year. They pay for every conference, any conference of choice, everything, flight, boarding, all that. And then in addition, they gave me cash on top of that. And then again, more coaches and more mentoring and all those kind of things. But basically, I framed my pitch to look at, one, kids are about 25, 30% of our present, but they're 100% of our future. And so how do we get, to the elderly population and just all those kind of things? But I tied my pitch to that. I won. And that was also another blessing because of the resources that was given. And, I say that to say, like you said, one, learn the trade of pitching, the art of it. And then, that puts you in a better position to where you're not selling away your company already given 5 and 10% of a great idea. And those are things that people need to learn too.
Yeah.
That 5% now may be nothing, or 1,000, or even, let's just even say if it's 1 million now, but if your company grows, that 5% means a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that was going to be that's fantastic. That was going to be my next question, because that's a foreign concept for a lot of people who haven't gone out into the market to raise capital, especially in the tech sector. And so, right. But before we get into that, I love what you just described. There are resources, because I get this question all the time. I've got this idea, but I don't know, what should I do? And what you just told us, Dr. Phil, is if you have the perseverance, if you have the grit, starting with number one, SBA.gov, there's resources, free resources and inexpensive resources to start investing in yourself, educating yourself, getting a coach. And that, I'm sure, opened up all the doors, as you described, to Digital Sandbox, AARP, Launch Kansas City. And from there, it just kind of propels itself, right? Once you get into a few resources and you're avid and passionate and hungry about making an idea actually work.
Yes, sir. No, you're right. And it just continues growing. Well, think about this. And everything is also, things are still relational, right? So those coaches have a relationship with the same community that you're trying to integrate. And so not only are they vouching for you, and those coaches also and then that connection to the community also gives you resources to write warm introduction letters to VCs and other folks outside. And so, it's still an ecosystem. That ecosystem is still connected. We always say that it's a small world. Well, even think of it in different ecosystems, the world is even smaller.
Yeah.
And so, those are the same folks that, that give you the connections and opportunities to, and then again, your talent, it's your talent after that. I'm not saying that it's a shoe-in, but people think that I just got a great idea and I can just plow through, put it out there and everybody's gonna buy it. Or what was that show? If we build it, they will come. Yeah.
Well, that's that's basic business 101 fallacy.
Right.
So
right.
I think the other thing, and I'd be curious on it's clear to me that you have a strong passion and you have busted through a number of walls to make this product work. And
right.
VCs and the people that you're selling this to, they can smell that passion and that hunger on someone. So if you go into a pitch and you're trying to raise capital, and I think this is true no matter whether it's, whether you're trying to, it's not just about raising capital, but I think this is true in all facets of life. If you go in with kind of a half-hearted idea or you're not really into it, people will pick up on that, and that will have a tremendous impact on whether you will raise capital or not. Was that your experience, would you say?
I agree. I agree. One of the things that people said is that they can see the passion. The other thing is they felt like it was a great founder product fit. I stayed in the sector that I felt that I was a expertise in, and naturally so, and looked at how could I improve it utilizing technology.
Yeah, you've
Basically,
got an incredible founder story. Now, how much capital have you raised to date, if you're allowed to say?
yeah.
Multi-millions?
Yeah.
Okay, and through that process, which I'm sure everybody can tell you about that process, and I've not gone through it from the technology perspective, but I used to be the managing partner of a digital asset hedge fund, and so that's a very capital intensive industry.
Right.
What would you tell people who haven't gone through that process, but are looking to raise capital? Let's stick to the tech sector, and what they need to know about ownership and equity. You talked about it a little bit before on be mindful of how much you give up, but can you tell us a little bit about the different capital structures or maybe creative ways you were able to raise capital and still hold on to as much equity as you could as one of the founders as you were able to or are
Right.
able to?
And I have to talk from the lens of who I am.
Yes.
So there were some stumbling blocks in there. I feel as a minority founder,
Mhm.
we know that I think it's like I don't know 2% of funding goes to minority founders, right?
Yep.
So the reason why I say that is because, and I would say this with anyone, but even more so in that sector. I just think the truth is, you know, again, I sought out competitions. I traveled for competitions. I was lucky, and some of it was during COVID, so I can just Zoom competitions, right?
Mhm.
Um, but the point is that I had to build a product, and like you said, a minimal valuable product. I called it a perfect small baby, not because I don't want people to miss that I'm saying a perfect product
Yeah,
because you don't have any feedback from customers.
exactly.
But the point of what I'm saying is that I had to build traction first. I had to. I had to build traction. One, it was such of an innovative product
Mhm.
that's first to market, where everybody believes that speech engines, which they are, so inaccurate because of their natural experience, right? When
Yeah.
you talk to Alexa, when you talk to Siri, all the corrections that you have to make. But we built our product around a custom language model, so it's still also able to predict what a person's saying. We break the speech down, so we have other fail safes. But if you don't have that experience, you automatically reject the product idea.
Yeah.
So the first thing I had to do was build traction before I can attract a VC. And even still, with that, please understand that raising capital is hard. It is a full time job regardless of the obstacles. It's not an easy endeavor. People and a lot of times what I didn't know is that they're investing in you, not your product.
Yes, exactly. That
So investing in the jockey, not the horse.
exactly.
And I'm like, but I have this great product that's gonna change the world. And they want me to be able to articulate, even if it fails, what am I gonna do next? And I'm like, it's not gonna fail. I have a great product. And I didn't know that. I didn't
Yeah.
understand that at the beginning they're investing in me, my ability as an entrepreneur to persevere, to be resilient, and or to pivot.
I'm so thankful you brought that up, Dr. Phil, because you can have the best product in the world. And this is one of the things I learned as an entrepreneur, you've learned as an entrepreneur. And sometimes it's very challenging for people to understand, well, but I've got a great product. Why aren't they? And it's why I brought up a little bit earlier the passion and talked about the entrepreneur. Because even if you have an incredible product, people are really looking at you and they're analyzing you and they're saying, when things get hard, because they always do, is this person asking me for my hard earned money going to stick around? Is this something that they have some skin in the game, whether their own capital or their own passion, and that they're going to stick through the highs and the lows that you talked about very early on in this podcast, or are they going to run hightail and go out? And that's what I think so many people don't understand. And we all have to learn it, right? Is
Right.
it's more about you as an individual and your emotional intelligence and how you react and your ability or your lack thereof to pivot and to deal through the emotions of trying to bring something, especially in the tech sector, to market, than it is what you're trying to do. And VCs have done enough investing that they understand that products are important, but people are really supreme. And
I agree.
isn't that
You keep saying emotional intelligence, and most people don't want to understand what that is, and most people don't know that that's actually like tied to great leaders. Is to be able to have the EQ, the emotional intelligence, and but leadership is one thing. Entrepreneur is a tug at your person, your being. I mean, it is. I don't, like you said, unless you go through it. Again, I wish we start kids off at elementary just to let them, all the way through, so they can perfect it. When they're coming out of high school or,
Yeah.
or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's it's tough.
And that's why I have this podcast, because I think, you had good business coaches and but you went through it, and sometimes it's very lonely. And
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
point of this is to talk to people like you who have been there, who have done it,
Right.
and just help them realize you will get through it. You don't have to feel alone, because there's millions of people experiencing the same thing, even if they're not right there in that living room with you or right there in that office going through those same things. And I really, the saddest group of people, and I didn't describe all four groups because I've described it before. I briefly can. People who are born entrepreneurs and they try it and they realize that. People who are not born entrepreneurs and they realize they're not entrepreneurs. People who aren't born entrepreneurs, they try it and they fail and they realize, oh yeah, I'm not an entrepreneur. That's not for me. But
Right.
the focus is on people who are born entrepreneurs, but they never give themselves the opportunity to realize that they're entrepreneurs because they don't take a risk on themselves. And they're, for
I
whatever
agree.
reason, whether they use excuses, I don't have enough money. You've debunked that whole theory that anybody can get money. There's lots of resources. And I want to focus a little bit more on something you said about you being a minority and gaining traction and how that impacted what you tried to do, or you're afraid of failure, because in our society, we kind of have, and I think we're getting away from this. And I think I'm really curious on your experience and your thoughts being in the education system with kids from pre-K all the way up through high school. We've cultivated this society that failure is bad.
Yep.
And so we build from a very young age, you can't fail. And if you fail, that's a bad thing. And that's the antithesis of what being an entrepreneur is.
Right.
You have, I would say, probably a million times more insight into that mindset in our youth than I do. Tell us about your perspective, given your experiences, on just that one focus of our society's perspective on failure and why it's so ingrained in our youth and what we need to do to change it, that it's such a
Right.
bad thing.
Well, I mean, you look at the grade system, right? You get an A, B, C,
An
D,
F.
or F,
Yeah.
right? But you'll be surprised. Like I said, we had 300 schools, so we had to have very high affluent schools, and we had the poorest schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll be surprised that even, let's not say Houston, in Missouri, there's Ladue, there's in Overland Park in Kansas. They actually, so if you're a student, let's say I'm taking a math class and I fail an assignment
Mm-hmm.
or I fail a test, you have the ability to retest or return in your work, because they were smart enough to understand that it's not about your initial grade, because we're being held to a standard of mastery,
Mm-hmm.
right? When they take the state tests and all those kind of things, it's not going to say, well, this kid failed your class, so we know that no. It's looking at how many kids obtain that information. That's the end goal of education, is obtaining the information, not you got an F and I'm moving on to the next subject or those kind of things.
Yeah.
And so So in those affluent schools, they're more concerned about mastery, not failure. That there's something that you have to do differently to be able to get the information. But the other thing that I was saying, this is unpopular, that I'm going to say, um, I would actually say that there's only two things right now. We only have two platforms in society that teaches it if it's done correctly. One is the military, right? So let's take it off the table because that's for older. But the other is sports. There's no other place that you can learn how to win, how to lose gracefully, how to persevere, how to work as a team, how to listen to authority, how to, I mean, everything, like how to deal with a outside critic, a ref, or like all those kind of things. I would suggest, even if you had the most awkward student, like start them off in soccer or something. But a child, because is but again, we also have to do it right. We have to discuss those lessons
Yeah.
of winning, discuss the lessons of losing, discuss the lessons of how do you push yourself to get past the I can't kick the ball or I can't catch the ball. How do you push yourself past those barriers? And so I did it a lot with coaching and working with kids in sports because I didn't have any other platform. I couldn't motivate a student to say, "Hey, you take this math class." And
Yeah. Oh
I know you
boy.
cause trouble. I know you cause trouble in school, and I know you're failing, but I can motivate you. And so, because the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of times where the system will say, "Don't let this kid should not be on the team. He's a troublemaker, or he's a thug, or whatever it is." And I'm like, but what other place can I teach him
Yeah.
these skills? Like we throw him back to the community. And so, yeah, I think that. I think the school system as a whole, we're doing a lot of things wrong. And then let's even say aside from sports, again, the lessons learned is so. For instance, who says I don't know who invented that. If we have reading 45 minutes a day, who says that a child learns how to read 45 minutes a day? What if I need 47? Just 2 more minutes.
Yeah.
You shut the book and you leave. Or what if I need 10 minutes? I have to sit and be bored for the rest. So unless we start looking at how to leverage technology to personalize learning, all this adaptive technology that we have to give smart insights and to adapt towards the student's needs, to be able to diagnose and prescribe and to grow a student, like without those things, I mean, we have to leverage technology. We have a national teacher shortage. We don't have enough time in a day to. And then the problem is when kids actually, what I developed playbook is really around the issue is like a GPS.
Mm-hmm.
If you're driving down the road and you're supposed to turn left in a road of reading, you're supposed to turn left and you turn right. We don't catch you until you're miles down the wrong road. Then we have to do catch up growth to get you back. And then we have to do another miracle catch up growth to catch up to the students that went the right direction.
Yeah.
That's easy with one student. But the problem is every student goes off at different areas and different times. Unless you have a GPS that says this student is going, let's figure out an alternative path, a personalized path for each of these students that have a learning pathway. Then we lose students. They have holes in their learning and they look like a Swiss cheese. Like that's their foundation, look like a
Yeah.
Swiss cheese. But the solution is really plugging those holes. But we cannot diagnose nor prescribe at the level. Everybody doesn't have that ability, but my technology does.
Don't you think, and I want to talk more about your technology, but you're getting into some really important national conversations that I'm so thankful that we're able to have on this podcast. But don't you think those are just symptoms of the root cause of the problem, with the root cause being it starts in the home? Because there's no educational system, Dr. Phil, that we can have that will educate the millions of kids and be able to look at them each individually. And I'm not saying this negatively, but I'm saying if it doesn't start in the home with the family unit, which is the foundation of any country or society's success, how can you possibly expect to send our kids, 100% of our future, off into a school system and have other people, teachers, have to bear that burden of teaching all of these kids at once? It's impossible. Ask anybody that's got 2 or 3 kids, how challenging 2 or 3 kids are. And now, oh, well, lump 30 of them into a classroom. And here, by the way, none of them have been given any of the foundation of reading, because that's really where it starts in the home, typically, a lot of the things that we learn as kids. And so good luck.
Right.
What is your perspective there?
So, so the reason why I tread lightly with that is because, man, I've been in the school system for a while,
Yeah.
and we have some good parents that just don't. I mean, they had bad experiences with schools. They weren't necessarily successful in school, so they don't know what to do, right?
Hmm.
And then here's the other issue. The real issue is that we have a large generation called the working poor, where people work 19, 20 hours a day just to maintain poverty.
Hmm.
And so what that means is that their child is not monitored, right?
Yep.
And so, but they still give us their best child. They still give us their child with the hope of a good education. The problem is, and I agree with some things that you're saying, but one, we have always had this conversation, and we really didn't look at solutions. The reason why I say that is because these same conversations happened 20, 30 years ago. But we know every characteristic that causes a child to be at risk, whether it's, it wasn't always single parent households, by the way, but
No,
you know
not at
we,
all.
we know all the risk factors that that cause a child to be at risk. But here's the thing. Now I can, and from when you look at data intelligence, business intelligence, there's no such thing as school intelligence, meaning that I can go to a store and it knows the customer behavior all the way down to a science. As soon as I walk in the door, there are things that is going to cause me more likely to buy them because they know my habits, right? They use data to inform their decision. In schools, we don't. We have more data than a Fortune 500 company.
That's a great
We
point.
sit on more or just as much data as a Fortune 500 company, and we don't even know where the kid is during the day. Could go to a school and ask somebody to get Johnny out of class. And not a knock, because this is my system. I love the education system. But what I'm saying is, and it's not everybody, what I'm saying, on average, though, it's starting to be a lot more than not.
Yeah.
Is that we don't know who the customer is.
Hmm.
Students are a customer, not the adults, by the way. Not and the parents. The student and parents are our customers.
Yes. Okay. I thought you were. I would say that the student and the parents. When you said adults, I'm like, wait a minute. It's the
No.
parents.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Not the people who work there are not
Yes.
the customers.
Exactly.
But the system is built around those who work there.
Yes.
And even, I got a lot of flack as a superintendent. I said, hey, we will never put the needs of adults over the needs of children. But yet we want to make sure what's comfortable for us. And I'm like, no, we get paid to do this, right? And so the issue is, we need to know the minute second that student walks through the door, what are we doing? We're wasting children's time.
Yeah.
They only get one time in third grade, and we only have one time to get it right. As a teacher, you do third grade every year, so you have a long time to get it right. But that student in your class, they only have that one shot to get it right.
I mean,
and so how long does a student have to sit there that's getting poor instruction? And guess what? The research is clear. After 1 year of poor instruction, the percentile of a student drops from, even if they're like at the 80 or 90, it drops to like the 60th.
Mm-hmm.
2 years of a poor teacher or poor instruction, whatever you want to call it, that student drops down to below the 40th percentile. You're doomed.
Yeah.
If you have 2 years of bad teaching, you're done.
Yeah.
Your career in school. Unfortunately, I'm saying. So what I'm saying is that if we have all this information and we really can personalize things, like are we doing too much as a school system? Some people argue that, why don't schools focus on education? Meaning, why are they handling sports? Why is the history teacher teaching sports? There are some good AAU or nonprofit organizations that can run the whole sports. Why are they handling health and medical? Why don't we have clinics inside of schools and partner with hospitals, that we have clinics to help students? Because some of these kids, trust me, I have sent students home that look like they have a broken arm. I don't know, their bone is is protruding, and the parent says, I'm going to take them to the hospital, the parent doesn't take them to the hospital because they don't have the means either.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a nurse on staff.
Yeah.
That child went through the rest of the year, and I promise you, it ended up being probably re-healed a broken bone. I don't know.
Yeah.
But my whole point is like psychological services. The students that we're neglecting become adults with mental illnesses as well.
Yeah.
We can house them. We can house them in our classrooms, and we can control them in a sense that we're protecting their illnesses. But then they get out to the real world and it's untreated. So food service, like all transportation, all those things interfere with teaching and learning. And so there's things that we can do. I'm saying that we haven't tried every solution. I'm not saying it's that easy.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's millions of kids, and there is a responsibility that a parent should have, but everybody's not created equal. I'm saying if we just hold it to that standard, we're going to keep getting what we're getting, because there's parents that they're in the situation that they're in because they wasn't successful in the school system.
Yeah.
If they can teach algebra, then
well, no, yeah, and of course, when I talk about in the home, it's a lot of people can't teach algebra, and of course, because we're all given different gifts. But a couple of points I want to highlight because it's so important, and then I want to get back to your successful story of PlaBook Education. It's not popular for someone like you to say, do you know that the parent and the student is our customer? That's who we need to be focusing on, and we've been failing our customer. And I think what's made you so successful, and what I think is going to take PlaBook Education and hopefully make it international, is that mindset of recognizing our schools are there for the parents and the kids, not the teachers and the labor unions and that system itself. And until we apply that business mindset, as you've done, to our education system, I think we're just going to keep failing, because it's like, okay, if I'm, Walmart, okay, Walmart sells stuff and they don't listen to any of their customers, and they just put whatever they want to put in there, whatever the CEOs and the managers think they like. And that's what they limit their inventory to. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to fail. So why is it so complicated?
Kodak is an example of that.
Yes, that's a perfect example. That's an excellent point. And now a lot of the younger listeners probably don't even know what Kodak is, because they took that philosophy.
Yeah, there's like 2 Sears stores left. Kmart is closing their last store.
Yeah.
Right. So there are examples in the business world where people don't listen to their customer. But listen, the schools are the only organizations that are allowed to function at a failure rate.
I don't
think about that.
I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense.
75% of your children read below grade level. You're only successful with 25% of children.
Well, and I can't imagine to what end it frustrates you, having been in the system so long, the educational system, and saying, I know how we fix this. But one of the things that you said that really makes me, that's disheartening, but I'm glad that you're tackling it, is you said we were having these same conversations 20 or 30 years ago. And it came about when I said, it starts in the home. And I'm a big believer that throughout the last 20 or 30 years, and I want your perspective on this, all we've done is thrown money into education. And because we're not looking at the parents and the students and the results, and if it's not working, throw more money at it. That's not going to solve the problem. If you just keep throwing more money into the fire gets bigger and the problem gets worse. And so I think it is a multi-step approach in, okay, what's going on at the home, and how can we help and support parents at home? Okay, because they're kind of the boots on the ground, if you will. And then in the school system, okay, now we need to fund it properly, but are we funding it in the right way? Is it working efficiently? And you just said, it's the only business that's allowed to fail and continue to fail. And I don't understand. And this is someone who, I haven't been in the education system as a teacher or anything of that nature. Obviously, I have my nieces and nephews who are incredibly important to me, and they're in the education system. And it's crazy what's going on. But why do we continue to fail in the education system when you have laid out for us just very basic common sense principles that we could have implemented 30 or 40 years ago?
Right. The other thing that I do want to add is that one is because schools function in silos. Like it really, in order to solve this problem, it is a nonprofit So it's a public private partnership with education. Like I said, there, you know how many nonprofits handle social emotional,
Yeah.
or like you just said, parents as teachers, supporting parents in the households and those kind of things. But they're not even working with school systems to have that happen. You know how many health clinics are outside the school as opposed to inside the school, right?
Yeah.
You know, there are many organizations that help with, you know, lights being turned off, or you know, no running water, or food deserts, or all those kind of things. But the whole partnership needs to be a public-private partnership with school districts. How many corporations, like you said, Walmart's out there, but you know, are they effectively sponsoring schools? Are there employees that are, you know, that they're the other thing that you mentioned is throwing money at it, and unfortunately, that's true, is because the money was mismanaged. It wasn't put towards the customer
Yeah.
or the customer needs. It was put towards the other customer that they think is the customer,
Yeah.
and that's the adults within the system. You know, new office chair. I mean, there's seriously there are ways that they tracked it, and they found out they built, you know, new principal offices with office chairs, you know, and you know, all new computers, but they went towards the adults and not the kids, you know, like those kind of things. Yeah. So you know, the problem is all of that past mismanagement um reflects negatively on education, and therefore people are gun shy. But again, we have too much data and data systems now that should be able to solve that problem. We should be able to any given second know not only where that money went, but what impact did it
Yeah.
have on academics. See, that's the other thing. Like in businesses, you bet not you spend any money that doesn't go to the bottom line of increasing, you know, the growth of the company.
Yeah.
But in education, your money is not, there's no value added to your money. Like you can't tell the impact. You can't tell I paid for this vendor, and this vendor is saying that they're you know, tutoring, but what impact did that tutoring have on our kids?
Are they being
And year to
effective?
year, we just yeah we just we pay for. When I was superintendent, I came in, and it was in Mississippi, the lowest school district in the United States. I fired all the vendors, all the tutors, all the curriculum vendors that were coming in, and they were like, why would you do something like that? You've been here 10 years. That means you didn't do anything. Like, you know, you have to show, and I had to redo contracts. The people that I brought in, they had performance based contracts. If you're going to come in as a vendor and you're saying that your tool increases math, and you're saying that your, you know, experience of coming in and coaching teachers increase math, well then you need to show me.
Yeah, a meritocracy. I mean, it's common sense, a merit-based system. If you're effective, you get to stay. And what surprises me, and I don't even know how you survived in the school system with such a logical, business-minded perspective, is that's how everything works, except in these big, ginormous bureaucracies that are handling the most important thing, period, in terms of our future, that continues to be allowed. And I want your perspective on this, because I'm a big believer that the reason that is the case, and again, this isn't coming from, this is just having followed it for a long time and having a vested interest in the education system through people that are important to me, until the unions, and I don't want to make this too political, but until there is a focus on the effectiveness of unions and the perspective that they bring, and they actually focus on the parent and the student, I don't think it will change, because that power that's held there and the resistance to change is too great.
Right. Now please keep in mind, every state is not a union state. It's a right for work state, like Michigan, like
Yep.
Kansas
Great
City,
point.
like, you know, yeah. And there's still Texas. I'm trying to think. And the unions, yeah. So and they're still failing. So is that's what I'm saying. Like it's a good complicated problem, um, and data tells us, can pinpoint for us if we have data driven leaders.
Yeah.
Like but yeah, in those states that have unions, it's a huge problem. And we look at school boards. So you tell me,
Yeah.
listen, so I want to describe a situation for you. Because you say, how did I survive? I mean, I was held at gunpoint. They would cut my brakes on my car. On my, I drove, and every time when my brakes went out, and the people were saying, no, somebody cut your brakes. You know,
They
but
hated
listen,
you that much because of the change that you were trying to
change.
make.
Well, here in every community, I'm the largest employer. Not only am I the largest employer, I probably have the largest food system. I feed more people every day. I have the largest transportation system. I have the largest owner of buildings. Have the largest clothing if I'm a uniform school, janitorial service, construction service. I
Mhm.
have large. So, what people look at me as an employment agency, and so some people get on the board just to have their friends and family work there
Ah,
for and not be
corruption.
productive, not held accountable, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm also the only organization that I listen in Houston. The budget was 1.7 billion. Budgets hundreds of million in small school districts that I was in. So I'm also a multi-million. I'm a CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation, and anybody can come off the streets to my board member and start cussing me out in my board meeting. How's that possible? There's no CEO that you can go to, and I mean, if we flip it to entrepreneurial, like me making $1 million a year is considered a successful CEO. I'm the CEO of when I'm hundreds of millions of dollars a year corporation, and anybody can say I don't want to work. You're picking on me. What you get paid to do that,
Yeah.
right? And by the way, you sign up for a contract,
Yeah.
and by the way, you went to school to do that. So what I'm asking you to do, as in to educate kids, is like
Your
it's
job,
my
like, is that
life.
well, and I think to your point, and I think we saw this during COVID. I think what the teachers unions, and it's not just them, but Randy Weidgardner and the teachers unions did to our children was criminal during COVID. And now responsible people such as yourself are left, and all of us as parents are left to try to figure out how do we I mean, it's hard enough in this day and age getting kids to have the foundations. Now, when they miss 1 or 2 or 3 years of those very foundational elements, we're going to
Right.
be paying for that for decades to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I think what your playbook technology, or excuse me, playbook education, the technology you've created, uh, needs to be a part of and can be a potential solution or a solution to help us get there.
Yeah.
But
If we don't have reading fluency, reading proficiency, and the technology, that little black box in your hand is going to have all the information in the world. It really does now, but let's assume that it doesn't.
yeah,
Like your job or your life is dependent on reading through information, critically applying it. That's what you're going to get paid for.
mhm.
And by the way, and knowing what's good and what's bad information, because it's gonna. So just because you have that phone, it gives you every information in the world. It also gives you people are able to taint it and put bad information.
Yes.
And yep, and because of that, then that's where reading proficiency and reading fluency comes in. You don't have the excuse me, but if you don't have the comprehension skills to be able to do that, then
Yeah,
unfortunately you're dead in the water.
that's exactly right. And those are the basic fundamentals. I mean, if you can't read, you can't do any other subject. And that's the sad part about it. So I'm thankful that you're looking to tackle that problem. I want to jump back to something you said a little bit earlier because I didn't quite understand exactly the point you were trying to get across, and it's an important one, especially in this day and age. And that is on the topic of you said you were a minority trying to raise capital.
Mhm.
Tell us what you meant by that, or what was your point there? Were you saying that because you are a minority, it was harder for you to raise capital, meaning that there was still discrimination in giving money to black-owned companies, or were you saying it there aren't enough minorities trying to do these things, and that's why we don't see as much funding going to these great ideas because uh, everybody has different experiences and maybe some communities aren't given the opportunity or they're not taking advantage of the opportunity. Give me a little bit clarity on what you learned from it and what you would say about that.
Yeah, I can give a political correct answer. It's just the simple fact that only 4% of minorities are funded. So it's not that it's only 4% of people who apply for funding are minorities. It's only 4% are funded.
And what's the non-politically correct answer?
I mean, I, if let's see, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's people are just, they give the benefit of the doubt to people that are like them.
Okay, so and don't be afraid. Like, I want to hear this, and our listeners want to hear this, so don't be afraid. So what if I go in there, I'm white, okay, you're black, and you and I have the same idea. Was it your experience that I would be more likely to get funded than you would, and we did everything the same, exclusively because of the color of our skin?
Whatever the reason is.
No, I don't. I think this is important because, we all are all products of our experience, and I'm a big believer that in America in this day and age, everybody is. There are opportunities for everybody, no matter what, no matter socioeconomic status, no matter race. There are opportunities, and it's. I feel like, and again, this is from my perspective, and that's why I'm so interested in someone in the. Is it okay to say African? I don't know what black community.
Whatever you want to say.
Okay, the black community who has been successful. What your experiences are, because I can't. I've never had that experience, and I think this is an important conversation for us to have. And everybody is kind of want to tiptoe. Well, how are we going to solve it? How are we going to be effective if it inherently the funding is biased? Shame on us. We need to figure that out. But what I see again from my experiences in this country is, maybe in the black community they're just more enjoy something else, and so they don't ask for the funding, or maybe they're not as interested in trying to raise capital and they want to do it themselves, or there's a whole bunch of reasons it can be. And it seems to me, and again, I want you to take me to the carpet if in your experience I'm wrong, that we are utilizing that reason of racism or color of their skin in too many circumstances when maybe that's not the underlying reason for the outcome, or in this scenario, the lack of funding, where only 4% of, did you say minority or African American or black founders are funded?
Yeah, minority
founders. What's your perspective on that? Am I completely wrong just because I've had a privileged experience, or tell me, what has your experience been? Because I want to know, obviously, because I think that's how we solve this issue, is all of us listening to each other, putting ourselves in other people's shoes, which you can only do by asking someone and then actually listening, not just having a belief and not being willing to listen.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to do is I can tell you the answer, but I'm sure the answer has been told millions of times, and either someone is not listening, or they inherently there's bias where they don't do perspective taking.
Yeah.
Or I don't know what it is, but statistically it is impossible that only 4% of funding goes towards minorities. Like, that's statistically impossible. Second of all, in my experience, I can go somewhere and someone can have an idea that doesn't look like me, and an idea on a napkin, and they can get millions of dollars. And I have done everything in education. I have worked in corporate. Come on, man. I worked for Oracle.
Yeah.
I did work with Apple. I did work with Microsoft, and I did work. I mean, the pedigree is there.
That's why I love your perspective, because you've seen so much. I started
nonprofits. I've written books. Like, I don't know what else I can do to say I know what I'm talking about, and I still have to prove through traction in order to get funding.
Doesn't every
No, sir.
founder have to prove through traction?
No, sir. I just told you that people can get money just from an idea, and you have to know that.
Well, to be truthful, I've never gone in the VC, so I'm completely ignorant on that topic.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone on the investment side raising capital, but I've never gone through the VC process myself, and that's why, to me, it's interesting to hear that, because I'm thinking, in the 21st century, How
21st century.
how do we change that? What is do you believe it's inherent racism? Like,
So listen. So even when they say, okay, we're going to give money towards black, um, we're going to give money towards VCs that preference black entrepreneurs.
mhm,
So, but I'm saying the barrier to entry is like here. Like you in order to get funding, you need to be producing 500 to a million just to get basic funding. But that barrier to entry is not there for everyone else. So even when intentionally they do those good things, it's still saying I don't believe in you, or I don't, the benefit of the doubt is not there, because again, we just said you're investing in the jockey, not the horse.
yeah,
So I mean, hey, I don't know. I mean, but I've seen it in every sector.
yeah,
So for instance, I was in a inner city area when I first started, and I got to be on an interview committee of hiring teachers. Well, there's there's some people, they graduate from college, they have the same degree, and maybe they had a different dialect,
mhm.
right? I not
Wait, a
necessarily
different what?
accent,
Oh, dialect.
dialect.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't dialect. Okay,
no, no.
yep.
Uh huh. And I literally, people would say, I don't want them to. We shouldn't hire them as a teacher, by the way they speak. And I'm saying, and I'm not talking a foreign language. I
Yep.
just mean that they grew up in neighborhoods where, but they graduate they have the same degree as everybody else, graduate with honors, all those kind of things, and like we make excuses to say no is all I'm saying. And so it's not really even a, to me it's not really even a conversation, or it's a conversation, I'm sorry. It's not a guesswork, just from the simple fact that it is statistically impossible for only find 4% of people to fund. That's impossible.
But don't you have to look at the percentage of people that even go into the VC system? So, for example, if 100 if 100 whites and 100 minorities, for example, we'll just take those two. It doesn't matter. That's what we're talking about. Go in, and then it's only 4%. Okay, there's a real issue. But if 100 whites go in and only 5 minorities go in, like, the law of numbers, of course, like you don't have as many people going into it or asking for it, so that number is naturally going to be lower. Do you see what I'm saying there, or is that not the case?
It's not the case.
Meaning that you believe that equal number of applicants from all ethnicities are coming in, but we're getting disparate outcomes.
I've been in those pools.
And you've seen those pools, and again,
I've seen
to
it.
me, that's and again, my perspective, I just can't believe that's still it's so, like, for example, I'm talking with you, and like, if I was putting money out there and you pitch this idea, like, it's very evident and apparent to me that this guy is able to do what he's trying to do. He's in his industry. He's staying there. And the color of your skin isn't even a thought. Like, I don't even care. It doesn't even matter. I don't understand. And maybe that's it. Maybe because I'm just that clueless. But
Yeah, I don't know where you grew up. I don't know if you grew up in a diverse environment where
no.
you ignore you naturally ignore those things. Well,
Oh
I don't
no,
know,
we were white as white could be. But to me,
see, I mean, here's an example. Why do the same, if you go to a cafeteria
Mhm.
in any school, the whites sit over here, the blacks sit over here, the jocks sit over here, the nerds sit over here. Everybody everybody is comfortable with their group.
Well, that's true.
It
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
doesn't it
that's,
doesn't stop.
and that's
It
just,
doesn't stop as kids. It doesn't stop as kids. That translates to adults. I mean, you're going to give the benefit of the doubt to the group you're in, man. I'm telling you, I've seen. Well, even if we go into the numbers of who's actually more successful, it is not your average white person. Like I don't know, man. We just do some dumb stuff in America.
Well, yeah, well, and I appreciate you having this conversation so honestly and openly, because I given my perspective, I truly want to understand and figure out how do we solve that, because to me, race has become such a, like, this will sound ridiculous. My best friend growing up was Hmong, and had I not even heard as we grew older all this like racial tension, I would have thought too, okay, yeah, so I didn't care. Like, I was a kid, it didn't even matter. None of that mattered. And I feel like we make it, we inject it so much that it becomes an issue. And again, if this sounds, I mean, historically, this is a little bit ignorant, but in thinking about the 21st century, we make an issue, especially for kids, that it otherwise wouldn't be, because we like, I don't want to say force it on them, but do you know what I'm
No,
saying?
that's why when you say inherent racism, I disagree with you. It's not inherent. Like you just said yourself, you're born. You're not born. You weren't born. You didn't know your friend. There was a
Yeah,
differentiation.
I didn't care.
You
We
know
were
what I'm
friends
saying?
and we had lots.
That's that's more environmental. But I mean, I think we're changing as a society. You know, but we're not. We're definitely not there. And we can list these statistics all the way through, and they're not just numbers just because they're numbers. I mean, there are reasons behind these statistics. But again, it is, I'm telling you, it is, you know, this is statistically impossible to only find 4% of people that receive VC funding. And then the opposite is how many of those companies, well, maybe I would say this, maybe those who get funded are proven to be more successful in that 4% because it's such scrutiny and such a high barrier of entry, to where if you look at the large pot of those who majority who are funded and their companies who fail, I mean, it's actually a larger number of their failure rate so maybe that's,
Yeah, so that
maybe,
that type
maybe
of
the scrutiny
statistic
is not there.
that would be comparing Apple, and that makes sense. Oh, yeah, if only 4%, they've been more vetted, and
Yeah,
they're more
you're in a crowd,
successful. I
right?
mean, so that's my concern, is that we have so many statistics out there, and everybody, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but I've seen every poll. Give me a poll that shows this, and I can find it. Give me a statistic that shows this, and I can find it. And I feel like, similar to the education system, they try to bring up all of these things that say, "Oh, we're successful and we're doing," and I'm like, I don't need all of these numbers. I just need common sense, and I see what's going on, and I'm not even involved as much in the education system as you were, and you can see we are failing our children.
Oh yeah. But
So
from the standpoint of entrepreneur, that's why I said what you said. Like, it's nothing that I can argue it or change at this point in time. The advice is that you need traction. I would give that advice to everyone, but particularly even in that category, you need traction. And then you need to figure that out.
yeah,
You need to figure out how to get your product used, to get customer feedback, how to keep fine tuning it with the lean money that you have. You have to be lean, and that's just a reality. So it's not, I would want it to be something different. I
yeah.
will want it to be, but it's not. For whatever reason, it's not. And so the advice that I would give any entrepreneur is that you have to get your product used,
Well, and I think,
some aspect of your product used, and then you keep building it out, and you have to pivot it based off that feedback.
well,
I mean,
that's great feedback. And I mean, in
yeah,
those scenarios, to those VCs that are just giving money to someone on a napkin and they're not requiring the same level of traction, you shouldn't really have that money, probably because you're not very wise with it. Because I think uh, every everybody, I don't care where, socioeconomic, anything, if you don't have that MVP and you haven't proven traction, like, why do you deserve any money? Like, why should you get any money? And so it's sad for me to hear that in your experience, that there is that disparity. But I'm thankful that you're willing to have that conversation, because I think that's where it starts. That's how we
right,
make adjustments or make differences. But to your point, a lot of people may not want to have the conversation. Um,
yeah.
so
It's because it's painful,
it
and
is.
it comes with consequences too,
Well, but the most
right? So
the
the squeaky wheel, people want to quiet the squeaky wheel all the time.
yeah,
And
well,
so how do you not spend time? How do you are effective and do things like this, where you have productive conversations, and at
exactly.
the same time you still put your head down and work?
Yeah.
Like, and then as those conversations continue to get massaged, especially with influential people like you that continue to talk to other people and so you're able to gather more and more perspectives and advocate for more and more things, and it doesn't disrupt me sitting around soaking, saying, woe is me. No, I'm gonna put my head down and work, and I'm gonna get on great podcasts like this, and I'm gonna share my point of view. We're gonna go back and forth and discuss some things, and then we just keep having those bigger, impactful conversations, and people are gonna hear these, and it's gonna pierce somebody's heart, and that's how the change happens.
That's a great point, Dr. Phil. It's just talking, having conversations, and being willing to listen, actually listen, not just have someone talk, but listen, think about, and again, that just doesn't happen in Washington. It never happens. Everybody is so far to one side, and then as soon as someone opens up, their ears close. And so that's why I say I'm so thankful that you're willing to have this conversation, because it's something that's always perplexed me, and it's something I want to understand better. But given my experiences, I can only understand what I understand, and the only way I'm going to learn is listen and see other people's perspective. And the same thing as education, to your point, it's a hard conversation to go to the education and say, you're failing our kids. Okay, we need to make changes. And people don't like to hear that. I'm reading this excellent book, and perhaps you've read it, that previous podcast guest, Shannon Nukai Kafi, said was transformational for her. And it was called Extreme Ownership. And I don't know if you've read it or not, but it's by two Navy SEALs. And if you haven't, I would strongly encourage it. I just started reading it a couple days ago, but it's about exactly what we're talking about. Looking yourself in the mirror and saying, you want to blame all those other people. You were the individual in that scenario. You failed. Yeah, there might have been all these reasons, but you were the one that. It's just an excellent book, and it's a great reminder of, instead of pointing the fingers, which I think our society is so prone to do now, especially when we're so divided. Everybody wants to point the finger as opposed to just looking inwardly and saying, okay, am I doing that? Am I causing that statistic? Am I resulting, or are my actions causing this failure? And
Right.
if I am, how do I fix it?
Right. And I agree with you, and I think it's also about being results oriented, and action oriented. And so, after conversations like this, what do we commit to
Yeah.
internally? What do we commit to? Do we commit to saying, okay, how could I be a change agent in my lane? Just it's not something huge, but how could I, in my lane or my circles, how could I continue these conversations that results in action, and not just we get off this podcast and we don't talk about it again. Like, no, you spark some things in me, and hopefully I spark some things in you. And
Absolutely.
now it's like, okay, now I can frame my conversation a little bit different, and we keep being intentional about it to try to get, the results that should happen for everyone.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, the only way we're ever going to affect change in anything is from a grassroots, boots on the ground movement, not from something top down. And
Oh,
so that's a perfect segue into uh, PlaBook Education and what you're trying to accomplish. There was one piece that I think is so important, and I think your advice, wisdom, and experience on this topic is going to be incredibly helpful for people who are trying to accomplish what you've accomplished in the tech sector. As you raised capital, and whether it was debt and equity, and there's all sorts of capital structures, different ways you can get capital, how did you know when to give up ownership, when to take debt, or when to negotiate or push back? Talk to us about, because you've raised so much and been so successful, how you navigated that, what you learned from it, what would you maybe do differently. um, Tell us about that.
yeah, everything comes with a cost, and it's really looking at that cost, right? You raise equity, you give away equity. That's the cost,
Hmm.
right? You raise debt, you're still paying a percentage of that debt. That's the cost. Whether it's a note, or whether it's just straight equity, like all those things come with the cost. And it's your job to kind of look at the pros and cons, and the way what is best for your company. I think um, you know some of the research says that raising VC money sometimes kills a business
Yeah.
because you raise money so fast and they're expecting you to move at a faster pace, and that shouldn't have been the pace of your product or your company, and it just runs it to the ground. And so those are the things that you have to take into account. People don't understand that also when you raise a VC money and then you start getting people on your board, um, their philosophy is the bottom line. Like, are you profit growing the company? If not, then we can remove you, and put someone else there. And so do not raise VC money if you have a lifestyle business. If you're okay with making, and not saying this is, of course, it's not bad, but if you're okay with making 100, 300, $400,000 a year, just to maintain, that's a lifestyle company. So when you look at VC, they're looking to 10x their money and they're looking for you to exit. And so, if you're in love with your company and it's a lifestyle company and it's not made to be a multi-million dollar company, then raising, money is not the answer. Maybe you need debt to get you to where you need to get to, and you have a pathway to pay that debt off. I mean, that's those are just some of the little advice that you have to look at, but it's a lot more behind it.
Yeah. And other than some of the things we've already talked about, what was the hardest part of that process for you? Because if you've never done it, like sometimes you think you know what the costs are, but as you said earlier, you don't really know what the costs are. You didn't know that 5% in 10 years was going to be worth, $15 million. Now, maybe you could have never gotten there had you not given up the 5%, but what was the hardest part for you going through that experience? And for those who haven't done it before, from that hard experience, and just like everything, I'm sure there were a few failures along the way. What advice would you give to them so that they don't have to make those same or experience those same hardships?
Yeah, ownership or your belief of ownership is probably a difficult thing for most people to get over. Meaning, at the end of this, no, I'm not saying this is the case, but let's say at the end of this, I own 15%,
Yep.
but I own 15% of $1 billion company as opposed to 100% of nothing, right? And so strategically giving up ownership and understanding that just keeps going and going and going, because capital is the lifeblood. Money is king. Cash is king. And so, to that's scary. Um, and you should take that serious, because when you give up, you're giving up that ownership. That's your baby.
Yeah.
You invented it. But you may, at one point in time, you may not own it. And it's crucial of what VCs that you want involved, because people can run your product in the ground.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to get, they're trying to put it under the model that they know of. And so you can get a bad VC that's micromanaging, just like a board member in education. If they micromanage, and they're in the weeds, and that's not good. That's not comfortable.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think understanding the concept of ownership was hard. To give up a baby that I put my sweat, equity, and time in, and saying, wait a minute, I have to give some of that stuff up, to other people, and they didn't earn it. Well, I mean, they put their money. The other aspect is the understand the dichotomy between, traction, and the value of your company. I know this product is going to work, but that doesn't mean it's worth $1 million right now.
Yeah.
Or that, if I give you $1 million, I may take a large chunk of your equity. If you don't want that, then you have to get the traction you need to be able to stand on the reason why you think your valuation is at this level, in order to get the same capital, but and only give up a little bit of percentage.
You bring up a great point, and I'm sure you've seen Shark Tank.
I love
and I love when someone comes in and there's lots of examples of this. Our revenue is 300,000. I'm giving 5% and I want $1 million. Okay. Well, do you realize what you just valued your company at? And they look at them and like, what are the numbers that you're running? And I don't say that demeaningly, because we all have to learn, you learn, and Shark Tank has been a tremendous, I think, a really positive thing in that. I was watching with my nieces and nephews, or my nephews over vacation. And every time they would give something, I'm like, what's the valuation of that company? What's the valuation of that company? And by the end of it, we'd watched so many episodes on a family vacation, they could tell me that's what they're valuing your company at. That's what they're valuing at their company at. So we all have to learn that. Some are hard ways, and some of them learn on that show. And that's part of being an entrepreneur. But I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that is, and I'm guilty of this, and I think we all are as humans. We have this artificial, I don't want to say artificial attachment to ownership, and maybe it's an egotistical thing. And certainly there are times where you should hold on to it, but you also have to see the forest from the trees. And sometimes, as you said, giving up that 15% ownership, or ultimately maybe only having 15%, but your company was able to get to $1 billion in revenue over a 10-year time frame, is far more powerful than 100% of $1 million company, if that's ultimately your goal.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think there's other aspects of the raising process that people get caught up in, but if you don't know your numbers, um, I think the other tricky part of it is that there's a large group of entrepreneurs down because of the generation, like both in a company and founders of a company, they want a social impact.
Yeah.
And so people now are willing to work, and they want to know, what is this company doing that's positive, that's impactful. And then you have a lot of founders that they sole purpose is a social impact. But those are still different categories, I think, that people need to be cognizant of, because again, people are giving you money from a business aspect because they want to, raise money.
Right.
So yeah. And so, I had to think about that, because I have a mixed product. Socially, it does a lot of social good, right? Increasing reading, and yeah, I would rather give it free to everyone, but there is a business aspect of it that I have to make sure, and I had to learn. I had to learn as an educator. There's a business aspect of it, and you have to present that business case. That was hard too, because without appropriate training, research, learning, whether you take a class, whether you read it on your own, or those kind of things, if you don't understand how to and to look at that, and to do forecasting, and to look at your runway, just all those things that are necessary for you to be successful. And it's not just coming up with an idea and selling it to a few people and saying, hey, look at me, you can give me $1 million now.
Yeah.
There's a certain package that you need to package it in.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And you've been so gracious with your time and sharing so many of those concepts that are crucial to being successful in raising capital. Now, let's talk about briefly. And as I said, you've been very gracious with your time. I don't want to take too much more of it. We've had a fantastic conversation. PlaBookEducation.com, correct? Is where people
Yes.
can go to learn more about PlaBook Education. I've looked at it. It looks incredibly enticing. And as you said, applying AI and gamification to help kids learn. Where's the
Right.
company at now in terms of, you said you're in multiple school districts or in multiple states, and what is your overall goal? What does your growth trajectory look like? Give us some insight on what your future looks like there.
I mean, we want to be in every school in the United States. We believe right now we have the solution that's really hitting at that early reading, teaching the foundational skills, using speech recognition and AI to really enhance the reading. In our curriculum, and our gamification is second to none. Everything is custom built, and it's by an educator. Not that, and this is not, I don't want to be misinterpreted. It's not. Wasn't just in the classroom. I wasn't just a principal. I wasn't just a superintendent. And then I was at the national level. And then I also have been as a professor for 17 years. So it was developed by someone, and a parent and a user. I struggled when I was reading in third grade, until my grandmother taught me how to read in fourth grade. And she passed away on my fifth grade birthday. But just that passion, like you're saying, not only a person that had experience with trouble reading and those kind of things, and so you have a holistic product that is very intentional in every aspect of it. From even so, we have even two aspects of gamification. We have fun games, rewarding brain breaks that students earn tokens from their, performance and proficiency. But we also have games that are academic games that are particularly towards the skill that the student is lacking,
Mm.
that we use artificial intelligence based off the student's performance, that we recommend a playlist to the student. And the student is playing that game and having fun, but they're actually learning the skill that they have a deficit in. And once they master that deficit based off those games, and based off the strict academic games and their still readability performance, that playlist drops off and something else comes up there based off their deficit. We recommend reading material based off the student's interests, based off their reading level, and based off their errors, so that because it's about practice,
Yeah.
but it's about practicing that specific skill. It's not practicing in the whole sense. It's saying, hey, if you're struggling with the AT family, at sound. So we'll recommend a bunch of books that have cat, rat, sat, mat, hat, like all these stories. They're fun stories, they're engaging stories, but they're in a sense still having you practice that skill and allow you to get more fluent. Or if you have comprehension issues in certain areas, inferencing, understanding main ideas, we recommend stories that will pull that out of you more as you continue to gain proficiency. Then we add to it. Here's another thing that I didn't talk to you about. We have a patent called text complexifier. As a student is reading in real time, we can adjust the text of any book. So therefore, their reading is not too hard for them where they're frustrated. It's not too easy for them where they're bored. It puts it right at the 90th percentile, which is independent reading, 90th proficiency level, which is independent reading. And so it still challenges them and they're able to read it. So the reason why that's good is not just for that aspect, which reading fluency is perfect. But let's say this is really what happens in libraries. If I have a library of books and I'm a third grader and I want to read about astronauts, my school only has that book at the fifth grade level. Well, I can't read it
Yep.
until I get to that level.
That is
Not now.
so cool that you have
Now
that technology.
I can change. I won't change the content, but I'll change. I'm gonna change the context. I mean, not the content, but the text
Yeah.
to where it's at your readability level of any of. And so think about it in a classroom. Let's say we have a classroom. We're talking about alligator. I'm just making up things.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
talking about alligators. Well, usually I only have only a certain group can read about this. Now everyone can read and participate in the class at their own level, but still got their own meaning from the text.
That is incredible, Dr. Phil. And that's exactly, I talked about the problem of how do you instruct 30 kids in one classroom that are all at different levels. Technology, like you just described, is how you do that. And you say
Right.
that's your own patented technology that you guys
Oh
have.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
That
We use AI to analyze, your reading level, your errors, and all those kind of things, and start changing the text to fit in the lexile level of your readability level,
and
basically.
I
So
I love that you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. What do I mean by that? You're using data in your tool, just like the school system needs to do, and they're woefully lacking. And they have, as you indicated, more data than most Fortune 500 companies to adjust your product to your customers. And
yeah.
uh, just thank you for doing that. I've looked at it. I think we need more products like this. If anybody wants to learn more about it, or maybe they want to invest or they want to recommend it to their school district, is PlaBookEducation.com the best way for them to see what you're doing? How can they reach out
It
to you?
is.
Can they reach out to you through the website, or what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, they can definitely reach out to me through the website. And then, yeah, PlaBookEducation.com. I mean, we have a marketing issue because, like I said, we put all our money in developing the
Yeah.
technology and it's so intentional. And then when we go to the school systems, of course, they spread the word. But, give a little bit more time, and once we start putting our dollars towards marketing, it's going to be in every school because it works. We have the research behind it. Even just from a common sense standpoint, uh, every tool that's out there, even from the kindergarten preschool level, is either drag or drop or point and click, and we don't know if the student is practicing or producing. So for instance, if I say, what sound does the letter A make? Usually a student would drag that A on an apple, and then the technology tells you, yeah, it makes the A sound. That doesn't mean anything in a sense.
It-
That's not transferable skills when you look at reading. And people say, well, yeah, it does. Why are we always why would we want the child to read out loud or reading fluency? And when they read quietly in the classroom, and I will tell you, you don't understand reading. You have never read a book quietly. You hear your voice in your head. You are reading out loud in your head.
yep.
Try it. Try to read without making a sound in your brain.
What, uh,
It doesn't happen.
yeah, that's exactly. Well, I have this with my niece and nephews fight. One's reading and they just start reading out loud. And they're like, can you read in your head, please? It's like, well, that's natural. That's to
Yeah.
what you just said.
But what I mean, what I mean is silent reading. You're still hear your voice.
Oh, in your head.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
your
yeah.
head.
That makes sense. Yep.
It's still oral reading. It's just not done with your mouth.
Yep.
You don't look at something and you hear the word rare. You know what's rare. We talk. You know whatever it is. You hear that in your head when you're reading.
And your
So oral reading fluency that is done whether you're reading out loud or not. And so that's how a student needs to practice reading instead of just dragging and dropping a letter. What word is talk? And the student, just grabs it. Where our technology, even if though we have drag and drop and point and click, but we have it progresses to the highest level to where if that technology after you done, put the letter A on the apple, after you done, circled the letter A, picked out the letter A that made the A sound, then it goes to the highest level where you have to say it in order to advance your
I
character.
love that. You have to say
If
it.
it's asking you to blend,
Yep.
you have to blend it. You have to say it. Talk. You
Yep.
don't, that's what we do now. We grab the two words. What two words make, talk? No, you have to say it.
Well, and
And so,
that gets
yeah.
back to your
And
earlier
talk
point.
is that's a single syllable word, but butterfly or something like that.
Yeah.
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
blending, you get it.
It gets to the phonetics that you were talking about earlier. And I think the other, what I love from an entrepreneur perspective is as an entrepreneur, you have to decide where do your dollars are limited. So you focused on developing the technology and making sure that it works. And I think
Right.
that's incredibly wise because if you try to market something and you put all your money in marketing, although lots of companies do this, they just put tons of money in marketing, but the product isn't necessarily that effective. But
Right. And the other aspect of that is, it, we can, where the other need is going commercial, right? Direct to customer,
Mhm.
direct to consumer, and having a subscription. But now that's actually more expensive because of marketing. So our pathway is direct to schools right now, direct to school districts. That's where kids are. And then we also have a parent component that the parents can get on and do the same recommendation. Once we have that familiarity, start cash is king, start having more revenue that once we were done now, we're building and all those kind of things and perfecting it. And now we can look at putting money towards, direct to consumer, because that's a whole different model.
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about earlier. Like it's a whole different model and it's a whole expense to that model as well.
Yeah, as you said, how do you bring your product to the market? Who is your market? And a lot of entrepreneurs try to feed everybody. Well, niches get riches. Focus on one, and then as you realize that you can expand to different marketplaces, and you have the capital to do so, then do it. What is your revenue model right now?
And so we go direct to school districts. We only charge $20 per student for the school year. So it's a site license
Okay.
that we charge. Uh-huh.
That's great. That's great to know. And that's the other thing that a lot, understand your revenue model and does it work
Right.
and how far can that revenue model get you? And sometimes you need to pivot. I think we've all learned that as entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Dr. Phil, thank you so much for all of your time. This is probably one of the most fun conversations I have had. Not that I haven't had, but we covered so many topics, not only
Yeah.
from an entrepreneurial perspective, but from a national importance perspective, this concept of education. It's going to be a huge topic in the upcoming elections. I think you have to contribute to the overall conversation because I think the approach that you are taking is gravely missing in our overall conversation at a national level. So I'm extremely
Wow.
thankful for what you're doing. And I think I'm certainly going to try to spread the word as much as I can because I think if we have a more results oriented approach to education and we just apply common sense business logic to the education system as you are doing, we would have dramatically different results in this country. And not only, obviously that's important for, PlaBook Education from a sustainability perspective, because every business needs to make money, but for our kids and for what
Yeah.
we are giving them for success or their ability to be successful in the future.
Right. Right.
Is there anything else that I haven't given you the opportunity to share with our listeners that you want to share, whether it's entrepreneurial advice, something particularly important about education, anything that you want to share that we haven't talked about already?
Yeah, I just think that we really have to look at conversations to get control of our education system. Again, if 85% of jobs that will exist haven't been invented yet, we have to look at how do we reskill, our the whole United States, right? People need to understand that you're no longer, even now, we look at the globalization, or what they call um, um, digital migration. If you look at it, a child is no longer competing with their neighbors or somebody from the next town for a job. You're going to be competing against someone from another country.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of the way that we, and especially because of the way that we have telecommunications, and the way telemigration has happened of services. So it's not just offshoring of products, but it's offshoring of services. Again, so if you're gonna in America, if we're not only competing against AI and we're competing against telemigration, a global society as far as access to the same jobs and those kind of things, like it's a level of national security that we look at, changing our reorganizing our education system, that we meet the needs for children. And I leave with another thing is that if if we had a bunch of kids who stayed at home to take care of their siblings and to work, we will file charges against the parents for neglect. But please understand that that has happened. And what we did was we built the education system around the agrarian society so those students can work during the summer and work during the spring and those kind of things and still attend school. So if we can build an education system around the needs of our children and the society that we have, then we can build an education system around the needs now. And it may not be the same framework that we have right now. It actually cannot be, because we're failing. And that failure has a larger cost than ever before because of the fast pace of technology. Because I mean, I get a new Apple phone every 8 months. I don't know, or 12 months in October, right? They're coming out with something new
Yep.
again, and and the new form of intelligence is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, because technology right now has a year shelf life. It's going to be faster than that. And if you're not able to learn and quickly think through something and be uncomfortable with unlearning it and relearning something else up in that same field to do that same thing, that same job or whatever, then
You're toast.
we're going to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's a fantastic note to end on. And I think anybody listening to this needs to take those words you just said to heart, share it with everybody, because the only way we are going to make this fundamental change that you're talking about that we need, and I don't think anybody disagrees that our education system is failing, or certainly parents don't. I think those who have benefited for so long perhaps would disagree and they'd like to keep the system the same. But if, as you so aptly put, if we focused on the customer, the parent, and the education, if we're going to do them the justice that they deserve in terms of education, we've got to completely upend the system and change it, to your point. And it is truly a matter of our national security and our ability to compete with everybody else around the
Right.
world, especially because the AI in the 21st century and technology. Dr. Phil,
Totally agree.
thank you so much for joining us. You've been so gracious with your time. We've covered a tremendous amount of topics, and I'm just really appreciative that you gave us the insight and this perspective that you did today. And I know our listeners are probably going to enjoy this as one of their most favorite podcasts.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you giving out the platform to allow me to even come on your show and discuss these things. You're doing great work, man. Keep it up.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, Dr. Phil.
You too.
What an incredible conversation with Dr. Phil. We covered such a wide range of topics, some that typically can be pretty combative or, hot button issues, but those types of conversations with people such as Dr. Phil and with me can be had from varying different perspectives. And I think if we have more of those where we listen attentively and we learn from each other, we can move the conversation forward on so many things in this country, whether it's education, funding through all socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds, and entrepreneurship overall. I hope you enjoyed it. Please reach out to me on Twitter, Holland Podcast. Tell me your thoughts about this podcast. Share it with your family, friends, and colleagues. This one in particular, because we covered such important topics to the country, I think more and more people need to hear the perspective that Dr. Phil has, and I think people will enjoy it. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Andrew Holland Podcast. There you can see the vigorous debate and visual perspective that Dr. Phil and I had. That's all the time that we have for this week's episode of the Andrew Holland Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us each and every week. Have a great week, and we'll talk again next Wednesday. Thank you for listening to the Andrew Holland Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, theandrewhollandpodcast.com, for additional content on business, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Andrew Holland Podcast, to get notifications when new podcasts have been released. And lastly, follow us on Twitter, Holland Podcast. That's Holland Podcast, for all the conversations we're having outside the podcast. Thanks again so much for joining us this week. Have a great day, and we'll talk again next week.